What's up guys, I'm Chirag and welcome to part 11 of tutorial series on Amazon API Gateway tutorial. In the previous tutorial, we have gone through on how to return binary data from Lambda function to the API gateway and from API gateway to the end client using Lambda proxy integration. And now in this tutorial, I am going to cover how to return pre-signed URL to download or access S3 bucket object or file. So if you remember, then at the end of part 10 of this tutorial series, I had touched upon what if the end client want to access a file and its size is over 100 MB or more than that, or maybe the size is more than 50 MB even, right? Hence, in that case, we cannot return the huge binary data. Instead, we can return pre-signed URL, and using that pre-signed URL, end client can get temporary access to that file or object, right? So here you might think that why can't we return normal S3 object URL? It's because we don't want to expose our object or file to public, and we even don't want to give permission to the user to access that object or file for indefinite period. So moving along, so what exactly is pre-signed URL? Basically, a pre-signed URL gives access to the file or object mentioned in the URL for the limited period of time set by the user who has generated that URL, right? So having said that, the user who have generated the URL have permission to access the object for which he has generated the URL, right? So let's get started. So we are not going to make any changes in terms of Amazon API gateway. So we will directly jump to the Lambda function that is bound with this endpoint, right? So this is basically the continuation of the previous tutorial. So everything is same where we left off, right? So here we are going to add one line basically. So first of all, we will comment line number 14 and 15 because now we are not going to fetch or read the content from the S3 bucket. So here we will add a line saying URL equal to S3 dot. So this S3 is referring to line number 6, right? That is S3 bucket object, Boto3 object, right? So S3 dot generate underscore pre-signed underscore URL, right? And here we will pass on few parameters saying the first parameter is followed by the method, right? So we want to get the object, so it will be get underscore object, right? Followed by params equal to curly braces, so that is the dictionary basically, followed by bucket colon bucket name, so that's going to be our bucket underscore name. So this bucket underscore name we will get from line number 8, right? Then followed by key, that is going to be our file name, so in double quotes key file underscore name, and finally the last parameter is expired in, right? So I will define 100. So expired in basically accepts value in terms of seconds, right? So after how many seconds you want that URL to be expired, right? So I'm saying here that after 100 seconds that URL will expire, and any user with that URL will not be able to access that S3 object or file, right? So now I think we are all done, and finally we have to make one more change on line number 26, right? So ideally we will return JSON over here. So I have defined headers as application/JSON, and within body I will say instead of hello I will pass json.dumps a dictionary saying URL colon URL, right? And then I'm going to save this. Even we can remove line number 27, we don't need, so remove that. and save this, and I think we are all done. So let's jump to the Postman. So here is our endpoint, and we have get method. We are passing S3 bucket name as path parameter and file that we want to access as a query string, right? So I'll say send. Oh, it says internal server error, so let's see. So let's go ahead and check the logs first. So here are our logs. It says type error, generated pre-signed URL got unexpected argument that is expired in. Okay, yeah, so we got the problem. It's actually expires in, not expired in. So I need to change that. Expires in, save, and let's try again. So I will say send, and now we have the pre-signed URL, right? So what we can do is I can simply copy this URL and paste it over here, and I will say enter. So now as you can see, the file is being downloaded, right? So we can open this file over here. So now this pre-signed URL will get expired after 100 seconds. So if you try again accessing that pre-signed URL after 100 seconds, it will throw you an exception saying it's expired, right? And with some error message. So let me copy this URL first and paste it somewhere safe. Now the implementation that we just saw was using lambda proxy integration, right? But now what if you want to use legacy method, right? So I will show you that too. So let's jump back to API gateway. We have to perform few changes over here. Click on the method, go to integration request and uncheck this use lambda proxy integration checkbox. Say okay, okay. And now we are back to legacy method, right? So now we have all the options. Now once this is done, navigate back to integration request again, click on mapping templates, right? Select second option when there are no templates defined, say add mapping template, define application /json. So the reason that we are defining this mapping template is because right now it will not be able to pass the path parameter or the query string parameter to the lambda function, right? So this template will help us in passing those parameters to the lambda function, right? So now click on method request pass through and say save, right? So now once this is done, we have to redeploy this API. So click on actions, deploy API, select the deployment stage and say deploy. But before we go ahead to Postman and try to invoke this API endpoint, we have to perform few changes within lambda function, right? So let's jump to the lambda function. So now here we need to comment line number 8 and 9, which is for proxy method, right? And we will uncomment line number 11 and line number 12, which is for legacy method, in order to access those path parameter and query string parameter, right? And say save. So well, that's all the change that we have to make within lambda function. Now once this is done, let's go to Postman and try to invoke that endpoint. So as you can see, we have URL over here. Oh, here we have a lot of slash, so let's remove those. Instead of json.dumps, let's pass on the dictionary itself. Say save. Let's try again. And here we go, right? So now we have this pre-signed URL for that S3 bucket using legacy method, right? So now I have saved that URL which I have generated the very first time, right? The pre-signed URL. So now let's go ahead and try to access that URL again, right? Because I think 100 seconds have passed on. So this was the URL that was generated for the first time. So let's try again. So as you can see, now it says access denied and request has expired, right? So this is how you can generate pre-signed URL and send it over to the end client. So well, that's it for this tutorial. But before I close, if you remember, then I have did a tutorial on how we can upload a file using API gateway to the S3 bucket, right? So now what if the end client wants to upload large file, for example, more than 20 MB or more than 100 MB or so on, right? So how we can achieve that? Well, that is something I will cover in the next tutorial, and till that time, stay tuned. And as usual, if you want me to do tutorial on any use case or service, then please leave them below and I will try my best to come up with a tutorial as soon as possible. And if you have any queries or comments, then again, please leave them below and don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel, and see you next time.